That is where the human spirit is built. That is where you grow as a person. How you successfully respond to those challenges in those moments when things are incredibly difficult and dark, and making it through still with a positive optimism and a vision for how you are going to successfully thrive and flourish after this time has passed.
Welcome to the Stark Reflections on Writing and Publishing podcast. There has never been a better time for writers. More information, options, and opportunities are available to you, but navigating these requires insight. Join Mark Leslie Lefebvre as he draws upon more than a quarter century of experience as a writer, a bookseller, and a trusted book industry consultant to explore and reflect on the writing and publishing landscape to help you make informed choices on your writer journey.
Hello, Reflectives, and welcome to episode 121 of the Stark Reflections on Writing and Publishing podcast. This is your host, Mark Leslie Lefebvre. In this episode, I have an interview with Sir John Hargrave, who is the author of Mind Hacking, the Sir John Hargreaves Mischief Maker's Manual, and the best-selling book Blockchain for Everyone. John is the CEO of Media Shower. His company publishes the blockchain investor website bitcoinmarketjournal.com, which reaches over 100,000 blockchain investors monthly. He is a frequent speaker, lecturer, and he was a hoot to interview. And that's coming up later in this episode. Right now, I'm going to jump into some of the comments from previous episodes. This comment for episode 120, Doing All the Things with Leah Cutter, Chad Boyer said, Leah's conversation was full of so much good stuff. Never heard of Amazon Pulse. Now I've got a goal to work towards. Chad also says that he likes her idea of a separate writing computer. That way, he says, it isolates your writing and you can't be like, oh, well, it just so happens that this fun game or Facebook is just a click away. By just having a writing computer with nothing on it except writing programs is a good isolation technique. Can't agree more with you on that, Chad. Chad also mentions as well that he was curious if there are any authors out there that aren't writing full-time but selling author nonfiction. He says, I feel like that Venn diagram is small enough that it is hard to find, especially since if you aren't writing full-time, you have very little time to do any writing, so a nonfiction book would not be in your best interest. Now, Chad closes out his comment by saying, thanks for a great episode, Mark. I'll see you at the Career Author Summit. Thanks, Chad. I'm actually looking forward to seeing you there. And speaking of forthcoming appearances, I'm just going to give you guys a brief outline of where you can expect to see me in the next few weeks and months. So, Sunday, March 29th, I'm going to be at the Idea Exchange in Cambridge, Ontario, doing a 2-hour talk and discussion with the wonderful people of the Grand River Romance Writers. On Monday, March 9th, I'll be in merry old London, England, at the Self-Publishing Show Live with James Blatch and Mark Dawson. You will be able to see me Tuesday the 10th and Wednesday the 11th of March. I'll still be in London, and I will be at the London Book Fair. On March 14th, you can catch me virtually as part of the Alliance of Independent Authors Self-Publishing Advice Spring 2020 Conference, so you don't even have to leave your home for that one. April 4th, which is the first weekend in April, I'll be doing a keynote at the Liberty State Writers Conference in Clark, New Jersey. And May 16th and 17th, as Chad alluded to, I will be appearing at the Career Author Summit in Nashville, and that is Jay Thorne and Zach Bohannon of the Career Author Podcast. It is their summit down in Nashville, and I'm so looking forward to that one. Of course, there's more, but I'm only going to list the ones happening immediately in the spring. But that's it for comments. Let's move on to a brief word from this episode's sponsor, Findaway Voices. Findaway Voices has the tools you need to get your audiobook out into a broad market of more than 43 retail and library platforms. You have opportunities to collaborate with the narrator and do payment splitting. You have the opportunity to upload the audiobook that you have already produced. You also have the opportunity to leverage Findaway Voice's network of thousands and thousands of professional narrators from around the world and use them to get your audiobook produced. There's many options for this. There's also options for being able to do audiobook promotions in their partnership with Chirp, which is run by the good folks of BookBub. So there's a world of opportunity that awaits you with audio via Findaway Voices. And if you're looking for opportunities on how you can leverage Findaway Voices as a small publisher or independent author, you can check them out over at starkreflections.ca/Findaway. And now for the brief personal update for this episode. As mentioned in previous episodes, I was just in Vegas, where I was one of the editors with Dean Wesley Smith and Christine Catherine Rush at the WMG Publishing Anthology Workshop. Such an amazing time, some amazing stories that I've purchased that are coming out all Halloween themed, and got to read some other stories for the other anthologies that were truly amazing from some really, really incredible writers. But it's not just about the craft of writing at this workshop. There's a lot of tips along the way, because as we're commenting on stories, the instructors are often sharing their own perspective. And one of the many things, of course, but one of the things that stuck with me was in one of the comments when Dean Wesley Smith was talking about the concept of an unreliable narrator. So an unreliable narrator is a narrator who, as you're following them along, you're through their perspective, so you're actually believing the things that they're saying, and that may be that they're misinterpreting stuff or other things like that. And so sometimes in particular stories, if you want to see an amazing example of a combination of unreliable narrators or twists, Jeffrey Deaver has a short story collection called Twisted, and he does an amazing job of fooling the reader, but not in a way where the reader is mad, because he always plants something in the story. And if you go back and you look at it, you realize that he'd planted it there all along, and you believed something because you made some assumptions. Now, Dean and Chris talked about a really good example of that type of situation is in the movie The Sixth Sense. And when you, I guess I can give away spoilers, but when you look at The Sixth Sense and you get to the end, and the shock ending is that the character Bruce Willis plays has been dead the whole time, and you look back at it and you say, well, no, that's not possible, because I saw him talking to other people, and I saw him interacting, and I saw him doing all these things. And then when you go back through the movie, you realize that the way that the director has set it up and done the scenes, you've made assumptions that he has manipulated items. You've made assumptions that he's been talking to people who can't actually see him. You've made assumptions that they actually saw him. And so it was just brilliantly done in the way that you can't be mad at the director, because there's multiple instances in that movie specifically where he's showing you, he's giving you all of the hints. But of course, because of the way that we engage with the movie and we're following the storyline, we're led to believe something else. And so this was an amazing thing to think about. And Dean talked about relating that back to when you're a writer, and he was relating it back to when he was a professional poker player. Dean said he wasn't playing the cards that he was dealt. He was playing the other players at the table. And the same is true for writing. You're not just telling a story, you're not just playing with the words on the page, but you should know at every moment in your story what the reader is thinking and what the reader is feeling. And in a story where you want to mislead them, where you want them to believe one thing but have something else happen, you as the writer need to know what is the reader likely thinking and feeling when you share something. So that's a critical thing to remember. It reminds me, of course, of the philosophy that David Gauguin built in his reader journey theory in the book Strangers to Superfans. A masterful writer and storyteller always knows what emotions, what feelings, what thoughts they are planting into the reader's mind. And knowing that, and knowing what the reader should be expecting or should be anticipating or should be assuming, is one of the ways that you can get away with an unreliable narrator. Unreliable narrator. Unreliable narrators is a thing too, but an unreliable narrator is a different situation. But whether you're doing that or you're wanting to plant something in there in a mystery or in a twist, but you want to have revealed the clues all along and just basically be pointing in the other direction. Hey, look over there. Don't look at this thing here, even though it's in front of you. That's the kind of thing. So this was yet one of the fascinating things that I learned about the craft. So again, I was there as an editor. I was there to offer my opinion, my perspective on the stories that I was buying and why I was buying them and why I wasn't buying other stories or even the business of making choices. I ended up having a list of, I think I had about 12 maybes and 6 definite buys, and then I could only add a few more buys, and it was a combination of word count, a combination of the theme or the topic area. So in my particular case, I remember I had 3 different stories set on November 11th. Yeah, it's the fall theme for that anthology. So Halloween and things surrounding Halloween, and so Remembrance Day in Canada and in the UK, but that'd be Veterans Day in the US. And again, I had 3 different stories. 2 of them touched upon pretty much the same topic, and one of them went in a different area. So I have 2 different November 11th stories, but one of them was more historic, and the other one, I mean, really historic. I mean, going way back beyond the World Wars. And the other one is more about soldiers and veterans and stuff like that from the modern World Wars. But again, I had to illustrate and show the writers why I was choosing this one over that one, why I was deciding to go with one story over another, and how that was being put together. So not only was I there to share my own knowledge, but oh my God, I learned so much just from listening to the other editors and just from talking to writers as well. So again, that was part of what was happening this last week, and I just got back last night. So I'm recording this on Thursday, February 27th, and I got in late on the 26th. Now, the other thing to share, my personal update, I got back to a full mailbox and a check from Canada Council for the Arts from the Public Lending Right Program. And what can I say? Let's just say that the check I received from the Public Lending Right Program is enough to pay for a tropical vacation. Yet again, that's 2 years in a row. This year, it's actually several $100s more than it was last year, which is absolutely phenomenal. It couldn't come at a better time of the year for me. And it's important to note, I'm excited about the Public Lending Right Program, and it's important to note, however, that in Canada, nonfiction titles are not included. And I have a couple nonfiction titles that I'd submitted, and I was about to submit an author's guide to working with bookstores and libraries, but I realized it's actually not eligible because the 7 P's of publishing success was not eligible, and Killing It on Kobo is not eligible. And they're not eligible because practical books giving advice or instructions, self-help books, guidebooks, manuals on any subject, so a cookbook, travel, nature, or professional guides, legal, technical, medical, scientific, etc. None of those are eligible for public lending rights, which means that there's no point in me submitting my author's guide to working with bookstores and libraries, even though I'm pretty excited about having that. But it would just be a waste of paperwork for me and for them. But that being said, my nonfiction ghost story books, even though you might even think of them as travel in some way, because Montreal, Sudbury, Ottawa, Hamilton, stuff like that, they are actually locales, but they're not considered travel books. They're considered probably entertainment. They're considered books that would be more read for the entertainment and the ghost factor than the guidebook to the city, even though it is a guide of ghosts of the city. But in any case, I'm happy that my nonfiction ghost story books have earned me quite nicely, and so have my novels and story collections. I mean, it's really, really funny. I go back to the very first book I published, One Hand Screaming, a short story collection, which I published in 2004, and it's still earning me money this past year, only because it appears in a couple of libraries. And because it was in a couple of libraries, I still received money for that. So again, if you are a Canadian author and you are listening to this, or you're an author of one of the 30 plus countries that have public lending rights, and a lot of the Commonwealth countries have this. So if you're in the UK, if you're in Australia, that's going to be something you should look into. Register your books with the public lending right. If you're Canadian, you can register the print book, you can register the ebook, and you can register the audiobook, and they're all eligible for that. So, for example, the registration category 1, which for last year would be books published 2015 to 2019, the rate per hit is $66.84. So every time they find one of your books in the library, the rate is this year is $66.84. And there's a maximum hit of 7. So, I mean, if you have 50 copies of your book in libraries of the random polling that they do, they're only going to count up to 7. So I maxed out on 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 of my books maxed out at 7. So there may be more than 7 in libraries, but I only got paid for 7. But I'm not complaining because I was pretty excited about what that netted me. And a co-authored title. So Shana Krishnasamy and I co-authored Macabre Montreal. So we hit 7 for that one, but the share claim is 50% because it's a co-authored book. So it's 50% if it's a co-authored book, or whatever percentage you're attributed to. Let's say three authors, that'd be 33% each or something like that. But the other ones, I get 100% of the bonus. I lost track of where I was. Oh yeah, the year. And then I have a couple books in the registration category that were published between 2010 to 2014. And so what happens is when you go back 5 years, the rate per hit drops down to $53.47. And I have one book in the category that was published between 2005 to 2009, and the rate per hit there is $46.79. So even for the old backlist titles, not a bad thing that you can actually earn revenue off that. I know I've meandered and babbled on long enough about that, but for writers in Canada and in countries that have a public lending right, I strongly urge you to don't delay, check it out. My very first check from public lending rights was probably $35 or something like that. But it's continued to grow over the years, and it's a great program that you should take advantage of if you're in a country that has one. And I just wanted to make sure that I kind of pound that into your ears for those of you who can take advantage of it. For those of you who can't take advantage of it, well, maybe you could at least be happy for the writers who can. Well, that's it for my personal update and the meandering babble at the beginning of the episode. Let's get right into this conversation with Sir John Hargrave. Hey, Sir John, thanks for hanging out with me today.
Mark, I can't wait. It's going to be fun.
So I have to ask because can I just call you John, or do we have to go with Sir? Is that okay?
We're friends. You can call me John.
Okay. That sounds good. But I do have to ask, have you been knighted? What's the story behind Sir John Hargrave?
I started my writing career as a humor writer. I had one of the first comedy websites ever. It was called Zug.com. And my first book was this book of pranks taken from our website. And one of the pranks, I had this idea, I want to go prank the largest institutions like the U.S. Senate and the United Nations and the IRS and the Queen of England. So I wrote the Queen and I said, Your Majesty, I would like to be knighted. Because I just thought Sir John sounded classier, doesn't it?
It does. It really does, yeah.
So I got a letter back from Buckingham Palace, and the Queen said, well, in order to be knighted, you have to do something honorable. I said, well, that's a lot of work. So I did the next best thing. I went to my local county courthouse where you can pay to have your name legally changed. So I paid $35. I went before a judge, and now here I am today, Sir John Hargrave.
Oh my goodness! Wow,
it's the easy way.
Well, yeah, well, but still, if you don't ask, you don't get, right?
That's right. And it's funny. I mean, now that Sir John Hargrave is on all of my books and all my legal documents, I do kind of want to do something noble and honorable. So it's been a positive thing overall, a net positive.
You have written multiple books. That is one of the most noblest causes I can imagine.
It certainly is, isn't it? Yes.
So I want to get into that, the noble cause, because there's a lot about reinventing yourself. I mean, obviously with this story, but then
Yeah.
even thinking about mind hacking and blockchain for everyone. What is the reinventing yourself when it's related to your latest release? And it kind of seems to be a theme within your career, right?
It is. That's a great question, because I started as a humor writer, as I said. And so then I went from a humor writer to this sort of geeky self-help author with mind hacking, which was very successful. And then I went to this kind of new, like rebuilding the global economy with this new book, Blockchain for Everyone. So the common thread, I think that pulls all those together is I'm I think a pretty good humor writer, so I can kind of make things accessible and funny. And I'm also a technology geek. Like I've always loved technology. Like I said, I'm one of the first humor websites. And it's kind of the mashing up of those two things that is the common thread that goes throughout my work. And I believe the world moves so fast today that we're called upon to constantly reinvent ourselves. We don't really have one career anymore. We have many careers, right? We have many careers. And so to do that, we have to constantly be adding to the skill stack. So the way I look at it is you've got these core skills. For me, it was humor and technology. You've got some core areas of expertise, but as the world moves, you got to keep following those passions, both professionally, but also as a professional writer. You have to follow those passions and add to that skill stack in a way that you can repackage what you've got into something that's truly valuable and unique for the world. And that's what I've done with this latest book. And the book is, in fact, a story of that kind of reinvention of myself as I get deeper into this new technology called blockchain. And it is funny, and it is about technology, and it is accessible, but it takes me in a totally different direction than this, pranking the Queen of England.
Well, it's kind of interesting because I was going to ask about the humor in the book, because you look at the placement of the book, you look at the cover, you look at the title, and immediately it's going to be scary. Yeah. And one of the things that goes well with humor, at least that I find, is that comic relief. So let's go back for people who are already intimidated by, not just Sir, but also by the term blockchain. In its simplest terms, or in its humorous terms, what is blockchain in general, and how does that, and how did you get into wanting to share about that?
Yeah, so blockchain is the technology upon which these new digital financial assets or financial monies are built. So you probably heard of Bitcoin. And Bitcoin is built upon this technology called blockchain. And I really got involved because Bitcoin has the most epic origin story of all time. So it started in 2008, and there was this mysterious figure by the name of Satoshi Nakamoto. And Satoshi put forth a proposal for a new kind of digital money. And the digital money, Satoshi argued, should be just as easy to send and receive as sending email. So think about the early days, like when we used to send letters back and forth to each other. And then if you remember, like when we switched to email, what a game changer that was. Because now it was free, it was instant, and that changed the nature of human communication. So Satoshi argued money should be the same way. It should be free. It should be easy to send to each other. So Satoshi puts this white paper out there kind of explaining this concept. And Satoshi then starts to gather a little band of followers, and they start to actually build this thing called Bitcoin. At the beginning, Bitcoin is worth nothing because it's just sort of a thought experiment. But then they actually create these little Bitcoins, which you can save into like a little digital wallet. And it becomes like real value. And then people start buying and selling them for real money. And first it's worth a penny, and then it's worth $1, and then it's worth $10. And as the Bitcoin idea grows and the network grows, the price starts going up and up and up. Hundreds of dollars and then thousands of dollars. And in my book in 2017, it's worth $20,000 per Bitcoin. So you have all these people who bought Bitcoin or got into it when it was like worth less than a penny, and now it's worth $20,000 per Bitcoin. Well, the most mysterious thing is Satoshi then starts handing over all of the keys to this project, all of the source code and the passwords to all the domains and all this, to all of Satoshi's lieutenants. And then Satoshi vanishes. Gone, without a trace. And to this day, no one knows who it is. And Satoshi left behind a fortune, which at the height of this was worth $200 billion. Now, who does that, Mark? Who goes off, creates this world-changing technology, and then disappears without a trace? And so people have driven themselves crazy trying to track down the identity of this character. Nobody knows if it's even a guy. Maybe it's a woman. Some people think it's a group. Some think it's a government. Some think it's aliens. I like the alien theory.
That's a good one, yeah.
And so that's kind of what got me involved in this whole thing. Also, I had bought Bitcoin in the early days, but it's a great origin story.
Wow, it almost sounded like you were attracted to it because it sounded like it could have been one gigantic prank.
Well, in a sense it is, isn't it? I mean, it is kind of like overthrowing the entire global financial system, and in that sense, it has a very prankster-esque spirit to it. It's a good insight.
Oh, so that leads me to want to know. So this isn't just a how-to guide. You said it's a very personal story.
Yeah.
And so, what the origin of you wanting to write this book then is what I'm really intrigued to find out about.
Yeah. Well, I bought Bitcoin then in about 2013. So this was about 5 years after Satoshi started this project, and it was really difficult to buy it at the time. Today it's much easier, but back then. I had to go to my local bank. This is one of the first chapters in the book, as I'm telling the story of talking with the bank teller. And you couldn't buy Bitcoin within the United States. You had to go outside. So I had to send a wire transfer of a large sum of money, because I was buying many Bitcoin, to Belarus. And I had no idea where Belarus was on a map, much less who this character was that I'm wiring this money to sight unseen. And the bank teller says to me, okay, that'll be 3 days to send the money. I said, 3 days? Wait a minute. 3 days to send money to someone? And they said, yes, that's a wire transfer, and it'll cost $35. And I said, don't you understand that this is exactly why we need Bitcoin? This is the reason why we need new digital financial assets that can be sent as easily as sending email. So here we are years later, and we are now beginning to see these new digital assets really taking hold. And we're beginning to see the United States really talking about a digital dollar. China's going to have their own digital currency coming out. So it's starting to happen, and it really is going to transform the global financial economy. We call it the one world money, because we are one world, we're one species, we're one planet, and that's where we're headed, is with one type of money. That's what got me interested to really write the book, was that experience.
Oh, wow. And you didn't just write the book once, but you, as I hear it, you've written the book twice. Is that true?
That is true. So I work with my editor, Jeremy Ruby Strauss, over at Simon & Schuster. This is our third book together, and he's terrific. He's had a bunch of New York Times bestsellers, and I trust his judgment completely. So I wrote the first manuscript of the book, and I sent it to Jeremy, and he called me back up, and he goes, well, John, this is how he talks. He goes, John, the first section is pretty good. There were 4 sections. First section is pretty good. Second section needs some work. Third section needs a complete overhaul. And the fourth section, just get rid of the fourth section altogether. And I said, thank you for your honesty, you dick. No, I didn't say that. I said, thank you, Jeremy. And then then I came back and reread it, and I'm like, he's right. Because my first draft was a bunch of essays about how this technology called blockchain is going to change the world and our need for one world money supply and so forth. And I realized that it needed to be wrapped up in a story. So my friend, the author Heather Kelly, at this point came to me. She goes, "Have you heard of this book called Save the Cat?" Do you know Save the Cat, Mark?
Oh, of course. Yeah.
It's a great book.
Yeah.
Great book. And it's about screenwriting. So it's about writing a movie screenplay, but he breaks down the essence of a story and how to lay out stories. And, if you ever see like a movie screenwriter doing, with the cards on the board, how they have the index cards on the board, he actually talks about how to build one of those and how it works and your 3-act structure and all that. And I said, that's how I have to rewrite this book, is as a 3-act structure. I have to write it as a movie, as a screenplay, to really tell the story and keep people engaged, because this is complicated technical and financial stuff. So I rewrote the entire book the second time. I sent it back to Jeremy, and he calls me up, and he goes, "John, we got a page turner." I sat down and I read the whole book, cover to cover, one sitting, 8 hours. That never happens. And I said, "Jeremy, I will feed on that praise for the next 5 years. Thank you."
That's fantastic. Now, you also wanted to include Bitcoin with the book, but what you ran into some issues with that, as far as I heard.
Yeah, so I had this great promotional idea for the book. I said, "Jeremy, what if we include a little bit of Bitcoin with every book? So you buy the book, you get Bitcoin." Now, the nature of Bitcoin is that the price fluctuates wildly. It's like an investment. It's almost like a stock, right? Where you buy Bitcoin, like I said, for a couple dollars, and a few years later, it's worth hundreds of dollars. I said, so if we included, let's just say $10 of Bitcoin with every book, imagine if the price of Bitcoin shoots up, the Bitcoin would be worth more than the price of the book. And then you would not be able to keep this book on the shelves. Jeremy, you'd have to hire a security guard to watch over the books. And Jeremy goes, "The last time I ever heard an original idea in the book promotion industry was never. And that is an original idea." And I said, "Brilliant, let's do it." So we started to look into this, and we found it's actually really difficult for a number of technical reasons to include Bitcoin. But we then reached out to this company called Coinbase, which is one of the largest kind of new financial companies that are specializing in Bitcoin and these new so-called cryptocurrencies. And another one called Maker. And they said, we would love to include this new cryptocurrency called DAI that we're building with the book. And DAI is what's called a stable coin. So a stable coin holds its value against the US dollar. So if you buy $25 worth of DAI, you have this cryptocurrency that will hold its value from day to day. So it'll be worth $25 tomorrow, unlike Bitcoin, which will go up and down. So he said, we are happy to, as a promotion, basically include DAI with every book that people buy. And maybe we do like $5. And I said, great, except let's make it $25. So now the book costs about $25, and you get $25 worth of DAI when you buy the book from Blockchain for Everyone. So this is only from our website, Blockchain for Everyone. It's also available on Amazon. It's available on Audible, but those do not come with the DAI offer. You have to buy it through the website. And they said, great. Cool. So that's what we're doing, and it's the first time it's ever been done to bundle cryptocurrency with the physical book. So we're making history.
Wow. So wait, this is for a copy of the physical book, not the digital book when you purchase it for $25 US?
That is correct. So when you get it from blockchainforeveryone.com, that's the website where you can also get, and it will get mailed to you with a little bookmark inside with a QR code that you scan, and it opens a Coinbase wallet, and you have the DAI, the $25 in this DAI cryptocurrency bundled with the book. Make sense?
Well, I'm going to get hold for 1 second. I'm going to go do that right now. No, I'll do it after our conversation.
Great.
Well, that's a great opportunity, great chance for people as they're learning about blockchain for everyone in an approachable way. They can actually have some cryptocurrency and rather than it just being a conceptual thing.
That was our mission, really, was not only educate people, but really get them, owning and using these new kinds of digital money. Because, as I said, when I bought Bitcoin, that was kind of my entry into this world, and we knew we had to make it really easy for people to also own a little bit, so then they can start using it and getting involved.
Well, that is great. That is great.
Blockchain for everyone.
.com. Yes, we got to check that out, and that's be doing that right after the call. Now, there's something known as the last month of cash, where things were at their darkest, and I'm curious to learn a little bit about that, because that happens to writers sometimes, right? Where things are not looking all that good. And how did you find the strength to go on? I'm just curious about that.
Well, in the book, we talk about this company. So I have a marketing company called Media Shower, and the book is the story of my journey into transitioning this media company into a blockchain-focused media company. So in the book, we have this thriving media agency, marketing agency, and we make this big pivot into blockchain, because we see how this market is exploding and things are on fire. But then in 2018, the entire market turned around for a variety of reasons I explain in the book. And so we end up having to lay off much of our staff, and we literally get down to our last month of cash. And it's extremely difficult and dark period. And what I learned in that time, Mark, is like that is where the human spirit is built. That is where you grow as a person, is in how you successfully respond to those challenges in those moments when things are incredibly difficult and dark. And it's not just making it through, but it's making it through with a kind of resilience and a kind of grace and a kind of poise and making it through still with a positive optimism and a vision for how you are going to successfully thrive and flourish after this time has passed, right? And being faithful that you actually are going to make it through and this time will pass. So the book is about that journey as well. And in that sense, I think it applies, it's inspiring, I hope, for anyone who's trying to make their dreams come true and trying to make things happen. Even if you're not interested in finance or technology, it really is about how we strengthen our human spirit to live up to our potential and create great stuff.
Wow, that is fantastic. Thank you for sharing that. Now, one other thing I wanted to come back to is the book is available in hardcover. It's available in ebook. It's available in audiobook. Now, I was fascinated to learn that you had done the audiobook for at least two of your books. You did the audio for Blockchain for Everyone, where you narrated as well, as well as mind hacking. Now, given your sense of humor and sense of fun, did the producers have trouble keeping you on your own script? Were you tempted to modify things along the way? I'm curious to hear a little about the creation of the audiobook.
Yeah, it's an interesting story. My son is actually a really talented audio engineer, and he's a high school senior, and he built really a professional recording studio in our spare room of our home. And he just kind of added to our hardware and software over the years. And then when it came time to do the audiobook for mind hacking, the publisher came to me and said, we're going to hire a professional voice actor to do your audiobook. And I said, no, you're not. we're gonna produce it ourselves right here in our home. And it was the ideal situation because we had as much time as we needed to make it just as great as we could. Now, Mind Hacking is a book about how to reprogram your mind like a programmer basically reprograms a computer. So we talk about how to sort of look at your buggy thinking, debug your thinking, and to kind of make new positive thought loops. And at the end is a whole series of guided meditations. We call them mind hacks, where we walk people through kind of like Headspace, if you will, but basically on a 21-day journey to kind of reprogram your mind. So we were able to do all that in this studio. And I think because of that mind hacking program at the end, that it's not just an audiobook, but it's also got all these great exercises. That went on to become an Audible bestseller. I think it's sold something like 100,000 copies to date on Audible. So based on the success of that, we then wanted to outdo ourselves with Blockchain for Everyone. So my son and I produced that one as a full radio play. So in other words, it has incredible soundtrack. It's got amazing, I do like characters, like 20 or 25 different characters within the story. We've got,
including your editor?
My editor is actually not a character in the story, just in talking about the book.
Just talking.
in the mythology of the story he is, but not in the story itself. And we're just so proud of the result. We've just gotten tremendous feedback from people saying that was not only one of the greatest listens that we've ever heard, but we weren't expecting it from a book around like blockchain technology. We were expecting something really boring and difficult to listen to, and instead we got this just a delightful journey. So really proud of it.
That's fantastic. Well, I just finished listening to Malcolm Gladwell's Talking to Strangers, and and it was produced in a similar fashion.
I heard that,
with multiple actual voices. Yeah, so I just finished that, so I'm very fascinated to put Blockchain for Everyone, the audiobook, even though I'll be buying the hard copy so I can get the currency, but I'll be getting the audiobook so I can check that out as well.
Thank you.
Fascinating. So then I guess sort of one last question for you. You're constantly reinventing yourself. You've gone from the pranks to all the way through to the cryptocurrency, and even media showers. You've sort of modified that company over time.
Mm-hmm.
Where do you see yourself as a creative humorist? That's what I'm going to call you, a creative humorist in the next little while. What's coming up for you?
Well, we are working on a new book called Blockchain Success Stories. And I say we, I'm working on this one with a co-author, which I've never done before. I've never co-written something. And my co-author is a fellow named Evan Karnapakis, one of the smartest guys I know. Evan is a character in the Blockchain for Everyone book. He's one of my poker night friends who we are talking within the book about how these new cryptocurrencies work. So if you read Blockchain for Everyone, that is the Evan that I am now collaborating with to write this new book for O'Reilly called Blockchain Success Stories. And Blockchain Success Stories is intended for, it's basically a selection of case studies of companies that have successfully implemented this new technology. And so we've gotten access to some of the biggest players in this space, the kind of the Googles and Amazons of tomorrow. And it's just been such a delightful experience to write this with Evan to date. So that is the near-term horizon that's going to come out later this year, and they're kind of releasing that on a chapter-by-chapter basis over the course of 2020. But I foresee myself having a much bigger role in the development of this entire global ecosystem. Ben Franklin started out as a kind of humorist as well, and he ended up kind of building many of America's greatest financial and economic systems, and I hope to have a similar role.
Yeah. He did okay for himself.
Yeah, not bad.
Yeah, excellent. John, where can people find out more about you if they want to follow you online? I know we can go to blockchainforeveryone.com. Where else can we go find you online?
I'm accessible on Twitter at Sir John Hargrave.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for hanging out with me today.
Really enjoyed it. Thanks so much. Keep up the great work.
Well, that was a fun interview with John. Now, I should note that apparently the offer that we talked about, where you can get the Bitcoins when you purchase the book directly from the website, only appears to work for those in the US, or at least I can say it does not work for people in Canada. I can't speak about the UK, etc. But as you see, at the beginning of this podcast, I was all rah Canada and Australia and the UK in my intro, talking about the public lending right programs that don't exist in the US yet. But this episode, of course, ends with a positive for those US authors who were initially left out. See, it all balances out. Now, speaking about the balance of things, I was really intrigued by what John said about facing adversity, facing challenges, etc. And I was really inspired by looking at when you're facing those challenges, when things are dark, when things are tough, and how you can come out of that. How you can come out of that a stronger, more powerful, better person, and believing in the convictions of what you're working on, which happens to us as writers all the time. Now, as a father myself, one of the classic poems that I've often thought about, if there's things I could teach my son, these would be the things. Now, this I'm gonna read a poem. You're probably familiar with it if you've not heard all of it or you've just heard pieces of it. It's "If" by Rudyard Kipling, and I think it was written in like 1835 or something like that. So while he talks about men and masculinity, when I think about this, I think about man in terms of mankind as well as womankind. So I'm not leaving females out of this. I'm just thinking of this as the strength of a person. And of course, because when I think of this poem, I think of addressing my son. That's important to me. So this is the poem. If you can keep your head when all about you are losing theirs and blaming it on you, if you can trust yourself when all men doubt you, but make allowance for their doubting too. If you can wait and not be tired of waiting, or being lied about, don't deal in lies. Or being hated, don't give way to hating, and yet don't look too good, nor talk too wise. If you can dream and not make dreams your master, if you can think and not make thoughts your aim, if you can meet with triumph and disaster, and treat those two impostors just the same. If you can bear to hear the truth you've spoken, twisted by knaves to make a trap for fools, or watch the things you gave your life to broken, and stoop to build them up with worn-out tools. If you can make one heap of all your winnings and risk it on one turn of pitch and toss, and lose and start again at your beginnings and never breathe a word about your loss, if you can force your heart and nerve and sinew to serve your turn long after they are gone, and so hold on when there is nothing in you except the will which says to them, hold on. If you can talk with crowds and keep your virtue, or walk with kings nor lose the common touch, if neither foes nor loving friends can hurt you, if all men count with you, but none too much, if you can fill the unforgiving minute with 60 seconds worth of distance run, yours is the earth and everything that's in it, and, which is more, you'll be a man, my son. Of course, in the interest of balance of things, that was Rudyard Kipling, If, man addressing son, talking about hanging on in the face of adversity, moving forward. But, of course, in the interest of balance and perspective, I will share the poem Still I Rise by Maya Angelou. You may write me down in history with your bitter, twisted lies. You may trod me in the very dirt, but still, like dust, I'll rise. Does my sassiness upset you? Why are you beset with gloom? 'Cause I walk like I've got oil wells pumping in my living room, just like moons and like suns with the certainty of tides, just like hopes springing high. Still, I'll rise. Did you want to see me broken? Bowed head and lowered eyes, shoulders falling down like teardrops, weakened by my soulful cries? Does my haughtiness offend you? Don't you take it awful hard, 'cause I laugh like I've got gold mines digging in my own backyard. You may shoot me with your words, you may cut me with your eyes, you may kill me with your hatefulness, but still, like air, I'll rise. Does my sexiness upset you? Does it come as a surprise that I dance like I've got diamonds at the meeting of my thighs? Out of the huts of history's shame, I rise. Up from a past that's rooted in pain, I rise. I'm a black ocean leaping and wide, welling and swelling, I bear in the tide. Leaving behind nights of terror and fear, I rise. Into a daybreak that's wondrously clear, I rise. Bringing the gifts that my ancestors gave, I am the dream and the hope of the slave. I rise, I rise, I rise. So there you go. I got a little bit of a reflection about facing adversity, one from Rudyard Kipling, one from Maya Angelou, because the words of those masters who have shared their thoughts, their perspectives, their feelings are things we continue to learn from every day. Again, this is Mark Leslie Lefebvre. You're listening to the Stark Reflections on Writing and Publishing podcast. Thank you so much for listening to the podcast. In the comments, I'd love to hear from you, your thoughts either on blockchain or Bitcoin, or if you're inspired by poetry or writing that talks about being in the face of adversity. I would love for you to share something that has inspired you in a similar way. Thanks for listening. This is the end of episode 121 of the podcast. So until next week and episode 122, this is Mark Leslie Lefebvre wishing you great writing and good Stark Reflections.
Thank you for listening to the Stark Reflections podcast. You can find show notes for each episode at starkreflections.ca.
The music for this podcast, Laser Groove, was composed and produced by Kevin MacLeod. Check out more of Kevin's great music at incomptech.com.